Standing on the hard-packed dirt of the eastern Mojave, it's hard not to feel at peace. The quietness of the desert air is a rare luxury in 21st century America. The stillness of the region stands in harsh contrast to the hustle of the Los Angeles basin. With little stimulation aside from a light breeze or occasional cicada to break the silence, it's easy to let your mind wander. Thoughts of what the region must have looked like when it was crisscrossed with lakes and grasslands only a few thousand years ago are difficult to conceptualize. In a way, the desert's current condition feels timeless. The few communities that dot the barren terrain still in a way feel like frontier outposts, clinging to survival against a cruel and inhumane environment. To most travelers on Interstates 15 and 40, however, the only thing linking these oases is a whole lot of nothing. If you aren't stopping, the Mojave consists of nothing more than a blurred mass of grays and browns, stared half-consciously at while cursing the lack of cell reception. As such, the desert is, to most, a temporal tax collector, levying a fee of 2.5 hours of monotonous travel to anyone just trying to get through it all. However, to the south, the ghost of Route 66 offers a more intimate perspective. When travel is slowed, and the mind begins to put the pieces together of what makes this region so special, a different picture emerges. Not that opportunity lasts long before another train appears. After all, for all the talk of self-reflection or deeper meaning, you are here for the trains. Due to that perceived emptiness, though, the Mojave has a more subtle allure, and often ranks low on the priorities of railfans visiting Southern California. For a first-time visitor especially, the desert is often an afterthought, a spectacle that will be best served to be visited on a future trip. After all, why would you choose to forego such legendary locations as Cajon Pass, Tehachapi, or Beaumont Hill to go here? This video aims to answer that question. The Mojave contains a wealth of historical intrigue, breathtaking scenery, and high-speed action, and BNSF's relentless battle with 120-degree desert heat, gale-force winds, monsoonal downpours, and 4 steep grades makes for one of the most incredible displays of railroading on the planet. We hope that after experiencing the desert for what it is, you too will come to appreciate it the same way we have for the last 20 years. Welcome to the Ultimate Desert Railroad. This is the Needles Subdivision. Formed in 1995 as the first of the mega mergers that swept the railroad industry during the latter days of the Clinton administration, Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railway, later renamed to BNSF, is one of the largest transportation companies in North America, with a network of 32,500 miles. However, we'll be focusing just on the 171 miles between Barstow and Needles, California, which makes up the entirety of the Needles subdivision. Originally constructed by the Southern Pacific to block the Santa Fe from entering California, today, the Needles subdivision forms the core of BNSF's rail network in the state, and serves as a vital component of its so-called Southern Transcon. Eastbound trains begin their journey across the Mojave at the road's massive terminal in Barstow, California. The tracks here form a giant Y, with the Needles sub going east, the Mojave subdivision to Bakersfield heading northwest, and the Cajon sub to West Riverside heading southwest. Union Pacific trains to Las Vegas and Salt Lake City have trackage rights from West Riverside to Daggett, 4 miles east of Barstow. From Daggett, BNSF trains pass through Mineola, Newberry Springs, and Hector, before beginning the climb up the west slope of the hill to Pisgah. After cresting the grade in the shadow of Pisgah Crater, eastbounds curve through Lavick before arriving at Ludlow, where another climb, this one to the summit of Ash Hill, begins. Just east of the summit at Ash Hill proper, the main line divides, with westbound trains taking the original track in and around Klondike, and eastbound shooting straight down the new grade to reconnect with the westbound track at the timetable location of East Siberia. Trains continued downgrade through Trojan and Baghdad before arriving at a town left behind by the construction of Interstate 40, Amboy. Bolo Hill is the next grade eastbound trains must face, and after passing one of the few online industries along the subdivision at Saltus and the top of the grade at Bolo, eastbounds immediately shift into heavy dynamics, racing downgrade into Cadiz. Here, the former Santa Fe line to Phoenix, now operated by Genesee and Wyoming's Arizona and California Railroad, connects with the BNSF. At Danby, eastbounds begin the tortuous climb up to Gough's summit and pass through Essex and Fenner before throttling down upon arrival at Gough's. From the summit, it's all downgrade into the Colorado River Valley, as trains pass through Homer, Ibis, Kleinfelter, and Java before reaching Needles. A wide variety of traffic crosses the Needles subdivision. This is an intermodal train, and the primary kind of traffic visiting railfans will see along the Southern Transcon. Intermodal freight takes advantage of standardized containers to seamlessly transfer cargo between road trailers, train cars, and ships, and BNSF handles two kinds of these trains. Ocean-going ships transload 20, 40, and 45-foot containers onto well cars at the ports of Los Angeles and Long Beach, and long consists of these imported, double-stack containers head east to bring goods from Asia to the rest of the United States. Domestic intermodal trains principally utilize 53-foot containers to transport parcels cross-country for companies like J.B. Hunt, Amazon, Walmart, and Swift. BNSF's Hobart and San Bernardino A yards handle these trains, and the hottest train on BNSF's Southern Transcon, the Los Angeles to Willow Springs, Illinois ZLAC WSP, is normally filled to the brim with these cream-colored United Parcel Service containers. Holiday traffic increases the number and length of these trains, and peak season on the Needles subdivision in late November sees over a dozen of these hotshots, racing across the desert to meet tight, two-day shipping deadlines. Manifest, or mixed freight traffic on the Needles subdivision, is heading to and from the road's massive Barstow classification yard. Classification yards work by breaking up incoming traffic into blocks of cars that are then sent on trains heading to other destinations. For westbound manifests, their journey will end in Barstow, with their cars being sent to Los Angeles or the Pacific Northwest, while eastbound manifests are heading to yards in Illinois and Texas, among other locations. Unit trains of ethanol are destined for BNSF's main facility in the Port of Long Beach at Watson. The hopper car behind the locomotives is a buffer car, used to put distance between the train full of flammable liquid and the locomotives up front. The National Transportation Safety Board, or NTSB, requires the use of buffer cars to keep crews safe and prevent the explosive ignition of fuel. Autorack trains carry finished vehicles from Mexico and the southern United States to California for market. BNSF has two main hubs for its auto traffic, one in San Bernardino and one in Richmond. BNSF also handles Toyota imports from San Diego, and many of these autoracks head east to Clovis, New Mexico for reclassification. Grain trains are among the heaviest trains to operate on the Needles subdivision, and are heading to the San Joaquin Valley south of Fresno to be used as livestock feed. The locomotives in the middle and rear of the train are remotely controlled by the lead locomotive, and are known as distributed power units, or DPUs. Sometimes BNSF needs to shuttle intermodal cars to terminals without having revenue freight loaded on them. These repositioning moves are colloquially known as bare tables, and can either consist of empty flat cars or well cars loaded with empty containers. BNSF runs a repo train from Phoenix to San Bernardino daily to shuttle empty containers, and this normally operates over the Arizona and California Railroad at night. Finally, two types of passenger trains can be seen on the Needles subdivision. This is an officer special, or O train. BNSF uses these trains to ferry members of their board of directors to and from terminals in Southern California. Amtrak also operates passenger service over the Needles subdivision, though normally only at night. Westbound train number 3, the Southwest Chief, can sometimes run late enough to be seen in daylight. When the train is this late, it often has freight power put on its front to help assist it to its final destination at LA Union Station. Locomotives used on BNSF's Needles subdivision are typically high-horsepower 6-axle units. Engines from Wabtec Corporation, formerly General Electric, dominate the fleet, with units from Caterpillar Corporation's Progress Rail, formerly Electromotive Division, occasionally mixed in. BNSF boasts the most modern locomotive fleet in the country, with 5 main types viewable on any given day. Even with the fleet decimated as hundreds of lease-expired units are purged from the roster each passing year, GE's C44-9W still forms the backbone of BNSF's motive power pool along the Southern Transcon. The Dash 9 is the flagship of GE's 4th generation of heavy-haul locomotives that began with the Universal series of diesels and cranks out 4,400 horsepower from an FDL prime mover. General Electric's Evolution line of diesels was introduced to BNSF in August of 2003 with 26 pre-production AC 4400 EV units, but the 7600 series of ES44 DC units were the first serial production GEVOs to appear on the Southern Transcon. Evolution series units were developed to meet EPA emission standards, and the 4400 horsepower GEVO prime mover in the ES44 DC meets so-called Tier 2 requirements. Introduced in 2012, the ES44 C4 is a radical departure from previous 6-axle locomotives on BNSF in that, at least part of the time, it isn't a 6-axle locomotive at all. The type is equipped with A1A trucks, where the center wheel can be raised and lowered depending on the need of the train. This theoretically gives the best of both worlds, with higher tractive effort on steep grades and less wasted power on flat running segments. However, despite the ingenuity on paper, BNSF train crews have tended to disparage the C4s for their poor tractive effort at low speeds. BNSF generally ignored these complaints for a decade, but finally relented and responded by, starting in 2023, ordering units with traction motors on all 6 axles, bringing the C4 experiment to a close. The ET44 series are the newest Wabtec-built units in the fleet and meet strict EPA Tier 4 emissions standards. The locomotives accomplish this by using an exhaust gas recirculation system to pump the gas made during combustion back into the engine cylinders, purging it of pollutants. This system necessitates extremely high temperatures to function, so the ET44 has massive radiators to compensate for the additional heat generated by the EGR process, and many of the units on BNSF's roster have scorch marks from where the paint is blistered. Introduced in 2005 as a successor to the SD70 Mac, EMD's SD70 Ace produces 4,300 horsepower from a 710 prime mover, and features additional pollution control measures like their GEVO counterparts. Initially, the type was bought by BNSF for hauling unit trains of coal out of Wyoming's Powder River Basin to power plants across the country. With many of these plants switching to natural gas or being replaced with renewable energy, ACEs were dispersed across the system, and now routinely show up as trailing units and occasional leaders on BNSF trains. Barstow Yard is the second largest terminal in California and serves as both a marshalling point for manifest traffic from the Los Angeles basin, as well as a crew change point for trains operating to and from both LA and Bakersfield. From Barstow, eastbound trains pass through the timetable stations of East Barstow and Nebo before reaching Daggett, where UP trackage rights trains depart for Las Vegas and Salt Lake City. This section of track covers 6.3 miles with an average grade of 1%. Track speed is 70 miles an hour, and the main line is triple-tracked CTC. Barstow is originally known as Waterman and sits alongside the Mojave River, a mostly below-ground channel which flows northward out of the San Bernardino Mountains. The river shares its name with the Mojave Basin, an expansive series of deserts and mountain ranges that spills into most of southern Nevada and far northwestern Arizona. From atop Bee Hill, visiting railfans can take in the grandeur of the basin and witness firsthand the struggle that humanity undertakes to survive in this inhospitable environment. Colonial interest in the region was sparse in the decades after the seizing of California from Mexico, but the discovery of silver and calico, several miles downriver, brought both miners and railroad interests to the town. In 1882, the Southern Pacific arrived from its terminal in Mojave at the base of the Tehachapi Mountains. The SP was in the area to tap into the silver and borax mining industry, but the road's directors had other plans as well. Racing westward from Albuquerque were construction crews from the Atlantic and Pacific Railway. The A&P had originally been chartered in 1865 to link Springfield, Missouri and the Colorado River, with a clause in the charter stipulating that the Southern Pacific was to connect with the new line around the California border. After a false start in the 1870s, construction resumed as a joint venture between the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe, and the St. Louis and San Francisco. The A&P then pushed west from Ailita, south of Albuquerque, across the Colorado Plateau and up and over the San Francisco Peaks to reach the Colorado River at Needles. At the same time, Southern Pacific completed their charter obligations and built across the Mojave to meet the Atlantic and Pacific. The two roads joined rails in Needles in late 1882, but the SP refused to forward freight through the A&P connection, with Santa Fe's own freight often being mishandled or lost on its journey west. A takeover of the Frisco by SP Chairman Collis P. Huntington resulted in an agreement where the A&P terminated its plans for westward expansion, with Santa Fe left with a hostile connection at its terminal. In 1883, Santa Fe President William Barstow Strong announced that the Santa Fe would build west anyways, paralleling the SP across California and to San Francisco if necessary, and this announcement forced SP's hand. Huntington had found his company with enormous debts from construction, and the two companies began negotiations to turn over the Needles line to the Atlantic and Pacific. A lease was finalized in August of 1884, with the road taking over the line to Waterman. The continued reliance on the SP for access to the LA Basin, however, left traffic levels low. Santa Fe needed a way to access the coast with its own trackage. To the west, Santa Fe's ally, the California Southern, had pledged to connect with the road at Waterman, and built north from National City to Colton in 1882. But catastrophic flooding in Temecula Canyon south of Riverside in 1884 left the line severed and the company bankrupt. Santa Fe stepped in to finance the completion of the route over Cajon Pass, purchasing the California Southern and bypassing attempts by the SP to cut off their approach. In 1885, the last spike in Cajon Pass was driven, and Waterman Junction became a critical intersection of the road's lines to San Diego and San Francisco. In honor of his accomplishments as president of the Santa Fe, Waterman Junction's post office was renamed to Barstow, the name the town has carried ever since. In 1897, the Atlantic and Pacific was reorganized into the Santa Fe Pacific Railroad, which was absorbed into the Santa Fe in 1902. The Needles Subdivision was finally purchased from the Southern Pacific in 1911, and Barstow has retained its importance to the functioning of the railroad throughout all eras of ownership. Originally, Santa Fe planned to build their yard for handling borax from Calico at Daggett, but in response to these plans, local landowners dramatically raised the price of their property. This caused the railroad to locate their facilities closer to Barstow, with the yard being constructed on the east side of Bee Hill. When the facility was built, it was used to break up and sort westbound trains from Kansas City and Texas, and reclassify eastbound freight from the LA Basin and Central Valley. At the time, Santa Fe's network had no yard between Barstow and Kansas City that could handle reclassifying trains, and Barstow Yard itself was small in comparison with other terminals in California, having only 30 tracks for sorting carload traffic. To handle projected increases in freight traffic, the road invested over $50 million, equivalent to nearly $350 million in today's money, in creating a brand new classification yard. Starting in 1973, the modern Barstow Yard was constructed to the west of the original yard, with 3 times the capacity of its predecessor. When the new yard opened in February of 1976, its centerpiece was a computerized hump, one of the first of its kind in the country. Cars being sorted at the Barstow hump are pushed by yard engines to the top of a hill, where individual cars are separated by a crew member on the ground. When disconnected from the rest of the train, gravity moves the cars down the 6% grade into one of the 48 tracks at the bottom, known as the bowl. Retarders slow the cars down to allow for coupling at a safe speed, and individual cars are sent to their designated track by automatic switches controlled by Barstow's yardmaster. From here, trim jobs take the cars to the departure or D yard. Manifest traffic arriving at Barstow is forwarded to the receiving or R yard, where the road power is disconnected and the train is taken by yard engines to be reclassified at the hump. Inbound road power is then sent to the extensive locomotive servicing facilities that are located on the western side of the new yard. Santa Fe's steam facilities were demolished entirely during the 1960s, and when the new yard was built, a state-of-the-art diesel shop came with it. Today, the Barstow shops are BNSF's most important locomotive servicing location in California. The shops feature 8 through tracks for performing 90-day inspection and light repair on the diesels assigned here. In times past, an agreement with the South Coast Air Quality Management District prevented older 6-axle locomotives from traveling into the LA Basin, so many older engines would need to be cut off and inspected here before returning east. Locomotives not needing inspection or repair will be fueled and have their sanders refilled here. Just south of the locomotive shops is a 2-track intermodal yard opened by BNSF in July of 2019. The terminal, a $27 million investment, was designed to help relieve truck traffic off of California Highway 58 and Interstate 40 by providing an alternative for high desert warehouses. The Mojave has increasingly become an important logistical center for Southern California, as coastal land is in short supply. And while plans for a similar facility on the grounds of George Air Force Base in nearby Adelanto had faltered, the new terminal has thus far been a success. Bee Hill and the Mojave River combine to form a choke point on the eastern end of the new yard. The line narrows from 17 tracks to 8 before fanning out again as it crosses underneath First Avenue. BNSF uses the old yard as outflow storage, so trim power will often be found moving cuts of cars to make way for new trains to be sorted. This was the original location of Waterman Junction. In times past, the Southern Pacific route from Mojave crossed the river here and connected with the California Southern's main line from National City. The alignment was moved to the west end of the new Barstow Yard in 1974, and today, nothing remains of the bridge. Lost too was the original First Avenue viaduct, which was deemed unsafe and replaced in mid-2024. Luckily, Barstow's iconic station has stood the test of time, though the site is no stranger to the necessity of building new structures. Originally, a wooden depot opened here in May of 1887, but this was burnt to the ground 2 months later. Its replacement was burnt down in 1892, and another replacement burnt down in 1908. Finally, the current station, known as the Casa del Desierto, Spanish for House of the Desert, was constructed out of fire-resistant material and opened in 1911. The station was one of the famous Harvey houses that catered to passenger needs across the Santa Fe system. Fred Harvey began building bespoke restaurants in Santa Fe depots in the late 1870s, and his network of eateries would become famous for their fine dining. Over time, however, changing travel habits and the shifting of passengers from trains onto the parallel highway and later interstate system caused the once reliable railroad business to falter. The Fred Harvey Company was acquired by Xanterra in 1968, with many of its restaurants shuttered with the decline of Santa Fe passenger service. Barstow was no exception to this trend, and Santa Fe closed the station in 1973. Fortunately, the city of Barstow acquired it in the 1990s. Today, the depot serves as a nightly stop for Amtrak's Southwest Chief and hosts both the Western American Railroad Museum and the Barstow Route 66 Mother Road Museum. A live stream camera is also located on the second floor of the structure and allows for railfans from across the country to witness the constant flow of traffic gliding past the station. In 1944, an interlocking plant called East Tower was constructed just east of the depot to help expedite trains in and out of the old yard. Interlocking towers hold mechanical levers thrown by a tower operator to move switches and light up signals to govern train movements, but all towers on the Needles Subdivision main line have been rendered obsolete by the introduction of Centralized Traffic Control, or CTC. CTC works by using radio to operate switches and signals, and dispatchers in a remote office can view trains on a monitor to appropriately line them up. BNSF handles dispatching duties in a joint facility with Union Pacific in San Bernardino, and this allows for closer coordination for the section of BNSF track that UP trains operate on between Daggett and West Riverside. Shortly after the Atlantic and Pacific began operations on the Needles line, Union Pacific began to probe into the Mojave as well. The road's Oregon Shortline subsidiary had surveyed a line south from Salt Lake City to Moapa, Nevada, but the Panic of 1893 had caused the OSL to go bankrupt and the grade had been left abandoned. E.H. Harriman, the chairman who helped reorganize the UP out of bankruptcy, was eager to connect the Los Angeles basin with the rest of the UP system and authorized a survey from Las Vegas south to Daggett, but the UP would not be alone in the Mojave for long. On March 20th, 1901, the San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Salt Lake Railroad was incorporated to build a rail line between San Pedro, California, and Salt Lake City. Owned by mining mogul William Andrews Clark, the line was in strict competition from the get-go, with Union Pacific's tracks reaching Caliente, Nevada later that year. SP, LA, and SL surveyors successfully plotted their own line up and over Cajon Pass to a spot called Otis, now known as Yermo, but ran into difficulty figuring the grade in the desert and needed to abandon the route past the Calico area. UP, by contrast, had looked to bypass the Cajon area by negotiating trackage rights on the Southern Pacific Sunset route to the timetable location of Banning. Here, a new line would cross Morongo Pass and Ash Mountain to reach the Oregon Shortline survey, but the proposed route was prohibitively expensive and was abandoned. Given tensions between Harriman and Clark over ownership of the railroad, and Clark's own preference for building the line to Salt Lake City with as little of his own money as possible, an arrangement was made where the SPLA and SL would be split evenly between Clark and Harriman. When the ink dried on July 7, 1903, the Salt Lake route was transferred to joint ownership, and construction began to pick up steam on the UP survey to Las Vegas almost immediately. In May of that year, the SPLA and SL's request for trackage rights between Daggett and Colton was approved by Santa Fe President E.P. Ripley. In 1905, the route was completed, and it quickly became a critical link between the UP's overland route and Los Angeles. While it's faded from its heyday in the late 1990s, intermodal, export coal, and iron ore traffic still snake through the junctions at Nebo and Daggett to exercise their trackage rights. The junction at Nebo is typically used for westbound UP trains. The BNSF Barstow terminal dispatcher will hold UP traffic here until main number 1 is clear of BNSF trains. Nebo was originally known as fish ponds. In times past, a series of small ponds was located here, but these were wiped out when the Mojave River flooded in 1938. The area was renamed by Mormon settlers after Mount Nebo, a peak located in what is now Jordan. Daggett was named after John Daggett, a lieutenant governor of California, and originally was known as Calico, but the name was changed to avoid confusion with the nearby mining town. When the Atlantic and Pacific took over operations on the Needles Line, Daggett was the most important station on the Subdivision and a major source of borax traffic. To handle the sheer volume of ore mined in the Calico Mountains, a two-story depot and interlocking tower was built at the junction of UP's Los Angeles Subdivision. After a fire destroyed the depot and tower in May of 1963, the duties of operating the tower were moved to East Tower in Barstow, and eventually to BNSF's San Bernardino Dispatching Center. For visiting railfans, it's hard to beat parking in Daggett and waiting for the trains to start racing by. With upwards of 15 movements on the Los Angeles sub and 60 on the Southern Transcon, the sheer volume of traffic pounding through the quadruple-tracked Junction makes Daggett one of the busiest railroad locations in California, a constant river of freight in this otherwise desolate landscape.